Hi, everybody. My name is Jenny. Welcome to my avid podcast. I'm so happy you're here today because I have a super special guest. Her name is Kimi Katiti, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. And I'm super honored to be on Miami Lit today. My name is Kimi Katiti. I'm originally from Uganda, Kampala, and I moved out to Los Angeles 8 years ago. So in 2013, I am an interdisciplinary artist. And recently I've been putting out YouTube videos, just sort of speaking my mind and sharing my opinion on a lot of things.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly how I came across your wonderful content was through one of your videos in which we will talk about shortly. But the way, and I've said this to you earlier, the way you put things so eloquently and easy to digest, it's so refreshing to see.
Thank you.
The way you put things so eloquently and easy to digest, it's been so refreshing to see someone, from the younger generation be able to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, you're so welcome. Thank you for finding the courage to turn that camera on and just start, speaking from your mind and from your heart. It's not something that seems like we're all able to do.
I hear you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Glad I could do it.
And you mentioned that you grew up in Uganda and South Africa. I'm wondering, do you believe your education there helped you become a much more self-aware person when it comes to recognizing ideologies?
Yes, it definitely helped me for the American context in like the 2010s. I would say in terms of recognizing a shift between our racial dialogue, between like white and black in America, my education in South Africa, granted, I went to school in South Africa in the 2000s. So
Right.
2007 to 2011, I was in high school there. And that was just a few years, maybe like a decade or more, a few years more after apartheid ended. So, racial tension was still very raw, but at the same time, there was dialogue around it because it was very raw, but it wasn't to the degree of uncomfortability that we see in the United States or that I experienced in the United States post BLM, like post 2016 Trump election. So that education, that time in high school, definitely seeded something in me that was like, something is a bit off the way we're discussing race right now in the media and in schools and socially.
Wow, that's so interesting because you were being educated in a place where they experience these very real racial issues, and then for you to come here and start to pick up certain things that let you know something's wrong, that must have been quite a shock, maybe.
Yeah, at first I didn't notice it, I'll be honest. When I was in college and when I first came to America, I really thought, like, in terms of racial tension, like it was way down compared to South Africa or other countries that I've been to. But then I kind of begin to believe a lot of negative, pessimistic, cynical things about race in America, and that then shifted my worldview. So I didn't notice that there was a lot of confusion going on with the dialogue around race. It's only once it got to a point where it was like there was too much mental gymnastics involved. There was so much guilt on the side of the oppressor and so much victimhood on the side of the oppressed. I was like, this is not empowering at all. Like, this doesn't sound like Martin Luther King Jr. It doesn't sound like Nelson Mandela. Doesn't sound like Desmond Tutu. So that's when, once it got too much, like 2019, 2020, I was like, okay, I need to pull back and kind of revisit my bases.
Was there a specific moment or instance that made things click for you? Or do you think it was like a gradual process?
It was a bit of both. I've had at least two very significant moments where things clicked quite vividly. First was when I realized that I was holding too many offenses. Like in my heart, in my mind, I was just offended by so many little things. And I wasn't like letting it go. I wasn't like forgiving, and I wouldn't grant forgiveness to people for, microaggressions or like perceived slights that I see as racist. And I'm a Christian, so like I kind of prayed through that process of releasing offense, of forgiving people. I feel like that was something that my Bible commands me to do, like regardless of race. It's like race is included in that command, right?
Right.
And then the second incident was through like just real life, going out to spaces that are, occupied by predominantly white people, straight white men, like skate parks, for example, and just realizing like not everyone is, this evil dominant monster. As long as you fit into this category, it's like it's all up to individual interactions and how people were raised. Like that's
Right.
gonna, it's just very different in reality what you're taught in colleges ideologically. So those are the two very specific incidents that kind of made me wake up. But all in all, coming out of this whole, I would call it woke ideology, coming out of that quote unquote woke ideology, took about a year or a year and a half of just like, really asking myself, is this situation really, do I need to react as terribly as I need? Like, do I need to overreact the way I used to?
Right.
Is someone really motivated by racism in this particular interaction? Do I need to just let it go rather than like harbor resentment? So that took a really long time, but I would say like 2020 is when I like was very vivid. Like I knew what I knew, and I was like, no, I'm done with like this woke thing. It's too much.
Right. Would you say that you've experienced racism in America?
That's a good question. I would say I've experienced some racism.
Mm-hmm.
I would categorize it more as microaggressions.
Okay.
So sort of things that you can't put your finger on, like, okay, I've had like maybe people who are like drug addicts or homeless, or people
Mm-hmm.
who are mentally unstable, like they will like call me the N-word or stuff like
Right.
that. But I don't really get offended because I'm aware of like their situation. So it's like I'm not really, does that make
Totally. I think
count that as a
I
racist?
right. I think I get what you're trying to say. So these people are obviously going through something. They're not completely there and okay of sound mind,
Yes,
and they will attack anyone, and they happen to attack you in the easiest way, which is your skin color.
exactly.
They could have also attacked the fact that you're a woman.
Mhm.
Um, right? It's
That is
I
exactly it. Yeah. Um, I mean, I could have easily taken a lot of those. I mean, just last week, I was going to 7-Eleven, and there was a guy like literally doing drugs outside, and he was like calling me the N-word over and over again. But,
really
I feel sorry for that person.
wow.
I'm like, dang, like this is so
Yeah.
sad. But I'm not affected in any way. I would say predominantly those are the sort of racist attacks that
Mm-hmm.
I go through. But there's also like the softer kind where you can't really tell. Um, just sort of like when you wonder, the more of the microaggression category where you can't really tell, like, is this racist? Are they just doing this because they're jerks?
Right.
That's the other type.
That's always the big question. Is your action coming because you're a bigot, or you're just, a jerk,
Yeah,
like you said?
yeah, yeah.
Right.
That makes up like the other. I would say like that's the 80% of the racism, um, which I just personally, because it's so open ended, I
Mhm.
don't really count it 100% as racism. I would say maybe it's racism and something else, but yeah, that's honestly my experience.
That's so interesting. And would okay, this question might seem it's probably kind of silly, but would you say you experienced racism in South Africa or Uganda?
Yeah,
You
absolutely. I would
did.
say, oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah, but that one was like, that's like real racism. Um, I'll give you an example. Like people there train their dogs to attack Black people specifically, because the likelihood of a theft or a crime, like they have dogs to attack, not just to like have as pets. So if you're walking by
Right,
a
like
dog,
guard dogs.
yeah, like American dogs, they kind of have them to protect their homes and stuff like that. The
Right.
white South Africans specifically. So they go to a trainer. The trainer uses like a Black, you know, dummy or something like that as an example, and the dogs are aggressive towards Black people. So you kind of get used to walking by someone's dog, and the dog just goes crazy barking, and
Wow.
that's like every day, right? Like I walk around the block, like all the dogs are going to go crazy because you're Black. It's like,
Yeah.
you contrast, that's just one thing. You contrast that to like living in America. It's just like, yeah, it's night and day for sure. But also like in high school, we'd always, there'd be a lot of like racist comments about Black people, and very specific sort of insults. Whereas here, I just feel like they're more, it's like so gray area. You kind of can't tell. You have to really like assume like, oh, I guess you said that because it was racist. But in South Africa, there's no assumption. It's like, oh, it's just blatantly, yeah.
Wow. Oh my, I feel so ignorant right now because I had no idea.
I mean, it's
Um,
one of those inside things. So yeah, don't feel
yeah.
bad about that.
I you know, because you get this picture that after everything you guys went through and apartheid ended, and you somehow found the strength as a nation to move forward, that everything's quote unquote okay. That's
Yeah, I would
wow.
say, yeah, it's still working through that. Like, like I said, it's raw. It's still very
Mm-hmm.
raw. And I do appreciate the fact that people can walk, like they can talk through those issues in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like America, given that it has been years since we've abolished like a lot of racist laws, the way we talk about it, it's like we're walking on eggshells. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
there, despite it being raw and very recent and still like figuring out the muck and mire, they can
Yeah.
talk about it in a healthy way that incorporates like forgiveness and like true reconciliation.
That's such an interesting contrast. Do you think it has anything to do with being this sentiment that we have here in America of having to be politically correct all the time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that has a huge role to play, which I think even makes it harder to talk about.
Right.
That's what
That's
makes
exactly
makes
what
eggshells.
I've found. It creates these very small parameters for which that
Mhm,
space for which you're able to have a real conversation without feeling like
mhm,
everything you're saying is going to be turned against you or be used to blame to put you in a certain light.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm wondering if over there you guys are able to just be more open with
Yeah, it just
whatever.
I would say that's a great point to bring up, because I feel like we're just talking about race, like, race and racism and apartheid. And maybe we might mention like the two political parties, the ANC and the DA, but like they don't really, I don't know. I don't think that someone can say I voted for the DA, the Democratic Alliance, and you conflate that with racism. I feel like there was just room uh, to say like, okay, that was like your political thing, in my opinion. And this is coming from someone who moved to US in 2013. So my
Right,
information might be a little outdated,
right.
just for the record. But here, I feel like there's no room to discuss race without also discussing the political side of the aisle. Like you know, it's like hard to say, oh, if someone voted for Trump and they were Black, it's like, it's people just like it melt down, you know.
Yeah.
There's no discussion about, you know,
Right. They're
why
sellouts or
sell out Uncle Tom. Like,
yes. Yeah.
I feel like there's too much of like a jail cell
Mm-hmm.
for the discussion around race that prevents us from like actually saying anything significant, unfortunately. And there's also the organizations that people are affiliated to that have their own political leaning and agenda. So yeah,
Right.
it's tricky.
And well, since we've arrived at the topic of racism, you have a very interesting video that I've watched a couple times. And it's one of those things where, first of all, if whoever's listening hasn't watched your videos, you're in for a treat because it's not just the content of your words, but it's visually just so nice. It's
Thank you.
you're very you it's easy to see how you're an artist.
Oh, thank you so much.
But back to that video on racism, and every time I watch it, there's like a new layer that opens up
Mm,
and a new point that I'm like, wait, what? I had never, thought of that. So now that we're talking about that, can we end
mhm.
racism?
Ah, that's a great question. I personally, I would say, okay, just for time, I'll just bring up 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that I feel like that goal to end racism is it's a manipulative goal
Mm-hmm.
by people who want us to incorporate ideas that hopefully will get us to that goal. And they're redefining what racism means. They're redefining what ending racism looks like. And they will, as long as you want to reach the goal of ending racism, they will keep feeding you these ideologies and ideas and thoughts that will get you to that goal. The second point that I wanted to make is that I don't think we can end racism because I don't think racism is, I don't think it's a category of sin or a transgression of its own. I think it's really just, it's hatred. It's like human hatred. It's prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from a place of psychological insecurity, maybe even childhood abuse and now compensation for that abuse. I've heard several people talk about that. A former Nazi also who came out of that said that he was spurred into that through just an abusive relationship with his father.
Wow.
So I think racism is really, it's like an amalgamation of so many of those psychological things that I just don't believe you can actually end people being bad, which I don't think you can stop people from being bad. We all have a propensity towards evil. I think it was even, I forget who said it, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was
Mm-hmm.
he wrote the book Gulag. He said like there's a line between all of humanity that is something to the effect of like we all have good and evil in us.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the exact quote, but yeah, I think that, you know,
Yeah.
if you do end racism, quote unquote, you're really kind of creeping towards a totalitarian state where everything is controlled, and now you want to end misogyny, and then you want to end people being taller than other people because they get an unfair advantage. Then you end pretty privilege. You don't want people to be
Right.
pretty, and you know, there's
What
also
would you
another book.
say? Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
Oh, I just
Sorry.
wanted to say there's also another book called We by Yevgeny Zamyatin about like people literally having to wear masks because they're too pretty, strong people having to carry weights because they're too strong. And so in order to make things equal, you know, they have to hold weights. People who are too smart, they have to
Oh,
listen to
wow.
the music so that they can be less smart. Yeah, so anyway, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. I'm gonna have to add this to my list. I haven't read that book. That
It's
sounds,
it's pretty old, so I wouldn't stress it. It's hard to read for sure.
yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, it sounds very much like Brave New World type of thing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Um,
Totally.
But I was going to ask, what would you say to people that, would say, well, I don't see anything wrong with getting rid of misogyny, racism, all these things that bring our society down. What would you
I
say to
totally
them?
hear you. To that person, I think you need to go back and really understand like what it means to be human. Again,
Mhm.
um, there's an assumption that we can somehow correct ourselves and be perfect people. And I feel like every time we do that or try to attempt that, it always ends very badly and very bloody. And I think if you trust science, go back and look at the data of history whenever someone tried to implement policies that make everyone equal, that give everyone the opportunity for equal outcomes. Like, just by human nature, we can't sustain that. We're all going to fall short and sin. And then what will the consequences be? Like, say we eradicate misogyny. One person is misogynistic, and I don't know what you would want to define that as. Maybe they catcall someone on the street. Like, should they be killed? Like, should we end them because they're creeping up? They're bringing up an old habit that we remove. So that really should make people think about like religion. Like, why do people turn to religion? Why should we act morally correct? Why do we feel like we need to live righteously and walk righteously and be perfect people?
Mhm.
Does that mean that we're created for a purpose? It'll lead you down this road of asking like important questions about life. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Right. I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. With, all these people that most of them mean well. Yes, it would be nice to live in a world where things like this don't exist, but just the human factor, like you said, human nature is always there. And we have
Mhm,
to find a more sustainable way of accepting that we do have a propensity for evil.
mhm,
We There's a lot of baggage that we carry as human beings, and
mhm,
maybe our time should be better spent uh, showing people or teaching them how to
mhm.
better, carry that bag that doesn't harm themselves or
Exactly.
others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I also just want to add this illustration. I don't know if you're familiar with like the killer whales in captivity at
Mm-hmm.
SeaWorld.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
We
if
don't
you
go
think about
to
that,
we don't go to Miami's Aquarium or
oh,
SeaWorld as a family because I refuse to partake. No.
right.
It's one
Exactly.
of the few like social justice things I will engage in.
Right. Got
Yeah.
it. I mean, that's smart because think about it. Like, they try to make these killer whales tame and perfect and just perform their behaviors,
And
and
they gave
they
them everything they need, right? They have all the fish
exactly
they can eat. They have their little pod or
exactly
water, whatever. Why are these whales not
right. Exactly, right? You would think that they have everything they need. Conditions are perfect. They don't have to even compete for food. It's just food is there, and like they
happy?
have the measurements for everything they need. But they still end up committing suicide. They harm themselves. The one whale in San Diego killed a trainer. It's like they're meant to be in the wild. Like, they still have that instinct in them. That's why they're kind of known as the killer whales. Like, they need the bigger ocean, they need the competition, they need to hunt for their own food.
Right.
So it's kind of like, if you're still going to create these painful conditions, if you try to make everyone perfect and simple, it's just
Mhm.
like you're never gonna get there.
I just feel like our spirit needs adversity. And
Exactly.
and by that I don't mean go have a hard life and unnecessary pain. No, but you should have the opportunity to, overcome obstacles, whatever those may be. They're going to look different for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
the more you look at it in through nature. So I'm so happy you brought up the whales. That's a perfect example. We somehow find purpose and meaning and the will through adversity and structure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Exactly. That's how they live. That's how they're meant to live. so yeah, that's something I visually, I'm gonna, remind myself whenever I feel like, oh, if I feel like we ever need to end racism, again, that's not to condone racism in any way. It's just like people are gonna mess up. Like you should
Yeah.
be expecting it and ready for it and ready to be resilient against it rather than try to control it and be like, hey, you
Right.
shouldn't exist. Be strong. Like I would encourage people to be strong.
Right. And that was going to be my next question for you, because it seems like right now we're living in a very polarizing world. If you say we can end racism, people are going to say, well, that means you, like you said, condone it. You're saying it's okay to be racist. And that it, why does it have to be one or the other?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't know the answer for that. I have a feeling social media is responsible for a lot of our very like dichotomous thinking. Because I honestly don't know where the inability to like kind of just think a little bit more deeper into like people's statements comes from. And I will say like it's, in America, there's this like huge divide right now, right? But I feel like people think in black and white on both sides. And
Yes.
I think we just need to like, it's a great thing that, you advocate for reading. I think we just need to return to like a habit of like reading deeply, spending like an hour just sitting down, or 30 minutes to an hour just sitting down
Yeah.
and reading and diving deep into someone else's like thought process. Because I think that the elimination of reading like is making people think that like a Twitter post is all you need to know about a topic.
Yeah.
And that's what makes people think like, oh, she thinks that we can't end racism, therefore she thinks people should be racist. It's like a very shallow form of thinking.
Right, exactly. Continuing on the racism issue, so we have organizations which you briefly brought up, like Antifa and BLM. How much damage do you think they've caused to minorities and African Americans?
Um, yeah, so I'll start with Antifa because I feel like Antifa is definitely hurts my heart a lot more. Antifa is their name. Let's start with the fact that their name is, anti-fascism, but their methods are basically, violence is okay as long as it's for the right side and until we get our goal, which is like a revolution, right?
Right.
I think they made a lot of people feel like it was okay to be physically and violently retaliatory through their whole like punch a Nazi thing, kind of in the mid 2010s, which like sure we don't like the Nazis, but then when they defined anyone who is not for their goals as a Nazi, then it's like, okay,
Again, that polarizing, if you're not this, you must be that.
That causes a lot of it causes a lot of confusion, right? For a lot of people, especially if you're African American or Black, it's like you start to look at everyone who doesn't agree with you or Antifa or BLM as the enemy, which is something that happened to me. And then the second thing about Antifa that really concerns me is that a lot of the people involved in Antifa are like these young, like from middle class, like white liberal kids. And it's like you're putting so much energy into a cause that might be more for your search for meaning than for like the people you claim to advocate for. And this all made sense to me like maybe 2 months ago, where there were parents mourning over their children that had been lost to gun violence, gang violence in Oakland. And these white Antifa protesters came to these Black parents and were basically protesting against them and protesting against the fact that they were doing this meeting with the police. And the parents are like, you don't know our stories. You don't know how my child died. Like my child died due to gang violence, not the police. And they're shouting over the Black parents. And that's when I knew that Antifa uses racism for their revolutionary cause. They don't really care about racism. Because if they did, they'd be aware of the things they do like that,
Right.
So that's my one problem with Antifa, is that it's more for the sense of purpose that those young white, like liberal, left-leaning kids are looking for. And then the second one, BLM, I from what I've heard, BLM started out as more of a community effort. It was informal. Early, like, what was it, 2014, 2015, there were chapters that would organize like food rallies and just like getting food out to the community. But then like it evolved into like the BLM organization, which I know a lot of people right now are kind of iffy about. So a lot of people are like, just be careful to distinguish between, you know, the chapters that are really there to help the communities and then the organization, which has its own agenda, I suppose. And I feel like it's hurting the Black community because they're more committed to an ideological cause, much like Antifa, which is revolutionary. Patrice Cullors is one of their leaders. It has been found on tape saying that one of her books, she compares it to Mao's Red Book. She is looking for a new form of revolution, like a cultural revolution, like struggle sessions, forcing people to feel bad for not being on their cause, not being on their page. They're trained Marxists. The leaders of BLM are trained Marxists. So BLM has been, you know, using the Black community's plight, using the deaths of Black people to push an ideology, you know, in the corporate world. Like, you have all these companies saying we stand with Black Lives Matter, in the media as well. But the moment that they chose not to support the Cuban people, when the July 11th protests happened, for me that was a nail in the coffin, where I was like, okay, you have the same criteria that you advocate for, people, right, Black people, brown people, suffering at the hands of the police by the thousands, but this time you're turning an eye because it's under a communist regime. And they intentionally, you know, they posted all these misleading posts working with organizations that are pro-regime, because that, you know, they don't want to denounce whatever it is they stand for, whether it's communism or just like I don't know what it is, something like that.
Yeah, it's difficult to figure out what their goal is. What do they stand for? What are we fighting for here?
Yeah,
it's not clear.
It's just not clear. And at this point, it just seems like it's more ideology based than actually caring about Black lives. There's just so much confusion with that organization. And I think a lot of people realize that now. But yeah, I think they're not to be credited, especially the way they were credited in the 2010s.
Right. And, you know, you brought up Cuba, and where do I even begin? to see someone like yourself, that you have no ties to, you know, you're not Cuban, you didn't visit there, and for you to use your platform for the Cuban people, that was where I'm going to go ahead and speak on behalf of all Cubans. We're very grateful, because you didn't have to, and yet you did, and you brought so many more eyes to what's happening. And you know, thank you, that's amazing. And we shall be so lucky to have someone like you speaking for us. It's interesting to see, and you also made a note of this in one of your commentaries. There's so many people that are quiet about this. Why do you think that is?
Well, I noticed the main thing for me is just the social media, like, I don't know what you call it, complex, that I think this trend really started, like, or at least I noticed it in like 2020 coming into 2021, which is that people wait for like celebrities and companies and even Instagram itself to tell you to be conscious of a particular cause. And the first time it really took effect to be like this all-encompassing thing was, I think it was when COVID hit. you saw like the organized like companies like Instagram, like they actually changed the interface to give you information about vaccines.
Right.
You had the circle at the top that would, it was like the stories post that would show everyone who posted about a specific COVID related thing. And then obviously creating that little like information tab whenever you talk about the vaccine. And then fast forward when the big George Floyd event happened, then you saw like this massive spread of, I don't know, everywhere it was like BLM, but
Right.
especially on social media, you had the record companies asking people to post a black square on Instagram on this Blackout Tuesday. A lot of people don't know that that came from record companies. That was Sony Music, Universal Music, I think Republic Records, or a few others. I might be mistaken, but I worked in the music industry at that time. So I received that. It was supposed to be just for like the music industry people, and there was going to be a Zoom call, but the black square thing really took off. And a lot of people did that. They posted a black square, and then Instagram was giving you, you know, here are the black stories to care about, here are black businesses to support. You had Uber, you had all these corporations and celebrities, everyone was there, right? Now, also, I just want to say, like, even with the Stop Asian Hate campaign, you had also Asians coming together, sharing their stories. You had the Instagram, again, giving you the option for stickers and stuff like that. But the reason why people are silent for Cuba now is because they've been trained to wait for that signal to like, okay, celebrities are lining up. They're telling you what to do, where to go, what action you need to take, what organizations you need to support. People are waiting for that. They're waiting for Instagram to give you a custom sticker so that you appear on the stories at the top. You know, they're waiting for corporations to send an email telling companies that we're gonna, you know, commemorate the July 11th protests. Because they're not seeing that, they feel like it's not a valid cause. They're unable to weigh it and see, like, by their own judgment, is this something that's a human rights violation? Should I care about it? And what do I need to do? Granted, the criteria that was required for helping the Cubans at that time was simply sharing on social media because the internet had been removed. So it was such a simple request, which was just amplify the Cuban voices. But I was like, well, because of all those things they have, I would say we all have been trained to look for. We're only waiting for their cue. And then when you notice that a lot of people are flying the American flag and they're Trump supporters in Florida, for example, waving the Trump flag, then it's like people, I think, were just like, okay, I don't want to look like I am right wing. And because no celebrity is doing what they usually do for other causes, I'm just gonna like sit this one out and wait because I don't know if this is important or not. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's such an interesting observation because you're right. We have been conditioned to wait for someone big to tell us what to care about. And it's the question then becomes, how come these celebrities don't show any care for what's going on in Cuba? I mean, granted, it's not happening here. Why should they care? But like you said, you alluded to, you know, with the Black Lives Matter, not the mess up they had with their Cuban post. Cuba has a large population of, you know, African descent. And it's not just in Black people living on the island, it's in our culture, in our food, in our music, in our literature, in our religion. It's everywhere. So, you know, if you really, it's not easy to understand. If you care about Blacks, you should. Why don't you care about the people in Cuba?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me that was just really strange. And I really couldn't like, the only reason I would understand it is because they're more committed to protecting the image of communism than Black lives. So it's a misleading title, it's a misleading organization label. And I hope that that opens a lot of people's eyes for their main intentions.
Absolutely. Yes, that would be the first great step towards some
Yeah.
sort of normalcy.
Mhm.
Um, speaking of Cuban communism, would you say that, how do I put this? Would you say that communism is coming to America?
I That's a great question because it's tricky, right?
Yeah.
To understand, like, how do you know this coming in, and how do you break this down? How can you, like, if someone were to ask you, can you give me data or evidence? It's like I can't really. I will compile it eventually, but it's going to be so anecdotal. And
Mm-hmm.
unless you're very familiar with, like, what, how communism comes into something, it'll be a very long session of showing you notes and stuff. So the first thing I would say is, like I said with Patrice Kahlurs, is she's inspired by Mao's Red Book. And not a lot of Americans, I think, are familiar with the Chinese Cultural Revolution, or in
Right.
particular, like, struggle sessions where people would just be harassed for not going with, the new thing, the new mode
Mm-hmm.
of the day. And I think we see that a lot, like, culturally, socially, where people get harassed. If you're like, no, I don't support BLM, it's like, okay, we're going to cut you off. Your job is on the line. It's a sort of new struggle session with social media involved. So that's one place I would say that we need to be careful, because of our black and white thinking. We're sort of
Right.
allowing people to dictate what's okay, and what is okay right now is really like socialism, Marxist ideology. That's why I'm very vocal against CRT.
Mm-hmm.
um, CRT is rooted in critical theory, which was started by a group of Marxists looking to reinvent Marxism, and they look for all the things that went wrong with the early form of Marxism, Leninism, and then sort of restructure it to
Right.
be infused in the culture. And so you look at critical race theory creeping into the schools, you look at, like, the modern struggle sessions creeping into colleges and the workplace. I would say socially and culturally, there is an internal reworking that looks a lot like other forms of other revolutions, like from back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Politically, though, I think it would be harder to pinpoint, just because there's not a lot of covert, like, I'm a communist candidate, or they're democratic socialists, but even still, like, they're not all on the same page. Some are more just focused on
Right.
healthcare. Others are just like, I'm inspired by these particular things, but I'm not, you shouldn't compare me to, like, Stalin, for example. So it's tricky politically, but culturally, I can say that there are certain patterns that I've noticed, if that makes sense. I'm curious to know what
Absolutely.
you think.
If communism is coming to America,
Yeah.
um, oh, okay. um, I think that first we need to, I would say communism wears many names and uses
Mm-hmm.
many different hats. And when we see
Mm-hmm.
candidates saying, well, I'm socialist, and or it's a different name.
Yeah.
But like Shakespeare said, any other rose, I mean any other name
Mm-hmm.
for a rose, right?
Yeah.
um and if you study a little bit of Cuban history, you'll see that Castro never
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm communist, I'm going to bring communism to the people. He actually
Mm-hmm.
openly said Cuba is not a communist country,
Wow.
when he was questioned at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say that it's because of our experiences, or trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But I happen to believe that communism wears many different names, and
Yeah.
it communism and socialism can be two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
And if we're talking about bringing socialism to America, to me, that's in a way opening the door and just a couple steps ahead of communism. I don't know if
Agreed.
that answers the question.
Absolutely. I totally hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, but like you said, it's so difficult to pinpoint, okay, this
Mm,
is happening. Now we need to do something because it creeps up little by little. And unless
yeah.
you study dictatorships like China and Cuba and Venezuela and USSR, unless you do the reading to bring it back to
Mhm,
those first sources, and you really dive deep and understand how uh what a gradual process this can be, it
mhm.
happens without you even realizing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So it's tricky. It's really, I would have to
Yeah.
sit down with someone for like maybe 2 days, like literally rent an Airbnb. We'll go through all the material, we'll watch documentaries. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's if only they were open about it, right? Then we could
Yeah.
say, you know what, I agree, I'll vote, or no, I don't agree and I
Yeah.
don't vote. But no,
Yeah.
it's never out in the open. It's never
Never.
transparent.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and speaking of all these Marxist ideologies, what some I often think that the reason why this ideas seem to appeal to people is because they're based on that very primal feeling that we all have of envy. Uh,
Mhm.
how do you think those two relate?
Man, yes, I feel like that is pretty much the summary a lot of people search for a long time. But I would say, okay, little rewind into a tiny bit of history. Um, Joseph Stalin, like 1925,
Mhm.
had a plan to bring, you know, the same kind of communism revolution to America through African Americans. That was his one way. He was like, they're the most oppressed group in America at the time. If
Right.
we can convince them to, learn about communism and learn about the revolution, that's how we're gonna get this thing to flip over, because it was just like impossible to break into them to America. And he invited, I think, like, and they were racist too. Like, they didn't like black people, but they wanted to use black people anyway. So they didn't even want to have 10 people go to Moscow. They like had what, 3 instead. Like, Comintern voted on only sending 3 black African Americans. So that just goes to show, first of all, that the goal isn't even to help black people or African Americans. And this is from Comrades, A History of World Communism by Robert Service. So like, if you want to look for that particular story, it's in that book. But they were focused on how can we tease, we're gonna elevate this group that we don't even
Mm-hmm.
like. It capitalizes on envy, the first thing, which is, look at everything you don't have and look at what those, like, capitalists have amassed and what they walk around with, and they're all white and they only want to do things for other white people. So they really wanted to, pick at that envy. And you kind of see that was a long time ago, and that was when racism was really like at its, it was strong. It was
Mm-hmm.
high times. But then you forward, and you kind of have these Marxist ideologies creeping in, but like the reason they're so successful is they're still pinging on that, like, sense of envy. Like in the African
Right.
American sort of culture, there's this critical race theory, which makes you look at all the things that you don't have as a minority, and to focus on that as sort of this is what you need to constantly think about and meditate on, which is that you are at the bottom rung. You're most likely
Mm-hmm.
not going to get a job because of your blackness. You're most likely not going to be, you're not going to get as many dates because you're a black
Right.
woman, like intersectionality, discrimination because of your blackness. So it's like you're looking at all the things that could go wrong due to your status, and thinking that this is a very useful thing, but it's only capitalizing on envy, and always looking at what someone else has that isn't in your, like, physical category. And
Right.
it's very dangerous because you're not teaching
Yes.
people gratitude, you're teaching people grievance. Like, You're
Right.
infusing grievance, and that breeds depression and anxiety. And yeah, so I say all that to say, yes, like this capitalizes on envy, but envy never produces healthy results. It
Mhm.
doesn't produce actual like creation of good things. Like it just leads down this road
Yeah.
of like death.
Well, that's why it's one of the seven deadly sins, right?
Exactly.
And like you brought up in one of your videos that the commandment to not covet, it's
Yes.
that's telling you clearly don't envy. And you don't need to be a Christian or a Catholic to appreciate, these
Yeah.
things. It's just a set of rules, not
Mhm.
just, but I think you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
I hear
But
you.
we
Absolutely.
can, from any faith or any culture, you can appreciate how these very simple 10 laws are
Mhm.
made for us to give us a guidelines to kind of coexist in a much more successful way. And
Absolutely.
yeah, these Marxist ideas have been able to hone in on that part of human nature that is never going to go away, right? No
Mhm.
matter how advanced we become, it's part of our nature. It's part of our who we are as biological beings. And
Mhm.
they've been able to really hone in on this
Yeah.
and turn it into something to and weaponized it against
Exactly.
ourselves. Yes, so it's yeah, it's interesting. I mean, to bring it back to Cuba, that's exactly how it happened. The poor was told that they were poor because of the rich.
Mhm.
And when you think about it, how does that make any sense? Well, you could
Right.
say, well, the rich are getting rich off of the poor, but and that may be true in some instances in history, but in that time period in Cuba was a very capitalistic country. The rich were rich because, yeah, you always have people that inherit, but the business appeal was there for people who wanted to prosper. So to
Mhm.
just simplify it in a way and say the poor is poor because of the rich, it
Mhm.
creates this breeding ground of envy and, like you said, depression and anxiety. And
Mhm.
it's so counterproductive because then people will not, those innovators, those
Yeah.
business people mindsets, they won't be put to
Mhm.
work because they're here thinking, well, I'm never going to achieve anything because this
Exactly.
person's taking from me.
Yeah. 100%. That's my main beef with Marxist ideologies, whatever shape or form they come in, is that you can't use that same ideology to be constructive. Like it's not going
No.
to empower you. It might make you angry for a little bit and make you like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this, but you're not gonna be able to sustain that. That's even coming from Nelson Mandela himself. He used to be a
Mm-hmm.
communist, but he was like, I couldn't sustain the anger of my youth. That's why he flipped to being more forgiving. Democracy in South Africa, even though he could have, supported the South African Communist Party, he didn't. Like it's not going to yield the sort of empowerment you think it yields, no matter how much you try to do it. Like even in my life, like I didn't notice that I had those Marxist ideologies, but that conflict theory was there. That whole like, I suffer because of the white man and
Mm-hmm.
the white straight male. Like that only made me so anxious and depressed that I literally I was doing much less than I could before, because I was just unable to function. Um, so yeah, it just always works against the empowerment it promises.
Yeah. um and you brought up CRT, and it's so easy to see how our academia has this loving relationship, for lack of a better term, with Marxist ideas giving birth to something like critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think that stems from? Why in
I
America,
think,
the quote unquote most free country in the world, and I use quotes for everyone else out there because they're going to tell me we are not the most free country, but we have it pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and you know take ownership of that. I said
yeah,
it. We have it pretty
yeah.
good. We are a very free country.
Oh
So
yeah.
For to be in America, in one of the most free countries in the world, and to say that our academia has these strong ties with what would be the opposite, right? Because
Mm.
Marxism, it's not so free.
Yeah. I don't know. I think honestly, it has a lot to do with like, this is just my personal opinion, right? I think it really has a lot to do with a lack of religion, because I feel like a lot of teachers, educators, just even people going into education, like they want to make the world a better place, but they also want to be good people. And when you remove that sense of like, I don't need to be religious at all, I think we all need an operating system. My friend Will Roosh, put in this term of like having like an operating system the way like your computer does. And if you box out like having a healthy like religion that says do unto others as you do unto yourself, you end up adopting these ideas as what makes you a righteous and good person. It's like,
Right.
People reading white fragility because they want to atone for any sort of white superiority they've ever felt in their life, or any sort of like thought of racism. It's like, let me now adopt these ideas because I need to like pay penance for that time. Maybe there were kids and they like wrote the N-word on someone's book or table, and maybe like did those things, and so they find themselves like, I want to be a better person. How do I, and then it's like, let me go get How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Let me go get White Fragility. Let me take in this curriculum that's based in critical race theory, and it's very heavy on guilt. Like those texts are very guilt based, right? So it kind of picks at that sense of like, I have some evil bad things in my heart, and I need to find a way to like pay penance for that or get atonement for that. And so they fill in that religious hole with all these texts and doctrines, whereas like if you were just to be like, everyone's a good person and you can improve your life and we want to empower, right. It's just too simple. It doesn't like make you feel really bad and horrible. So it's like, let's get these like dramatic books and fill that hole with it and then pass it on to these kids. That's just my personal.
Well, that's one of the aspects of all these Marxist ideas. The first thing they put aside is faith and religion of any kind, not just Christian, whatever religion. In to use Cuba as an example, it's largely Christian Catholic, but we also practice different what's called Santeria, which is a sect from the African religious influences on the island. And for a long time, people would be arrested if they were caught going to church, to a Christian church, or practicing Santeria. So it was all religion was the enemy. And it's so interesting that you bring up faith, because faith does provide you with an operating system, to quote your friend, that gives you some guidelines as to how to, again, live your life as successfully as you can. And if we have religion, then why do we need all these other ideologies? It seems like the two can't coexist.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that would be my assumption. Otherwise, I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't tell you why they choose these things. Yeah,
it's a shame, because you think of going to an American university, like the mecca of knowledge, and I'm assuming as a student, I know I did, you go into it believing that you're going to receive the best education you possibly can, and it's going to be an experience that will be integral to who you will become. And you go into it and you have to kind of like pick and choose where you're going to take away, okay, I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to make sure this doesn't come into my heart, because then we're in trouble.
Exactly.
And it must be so frustrating, because I went to college a while ago. I'm and it was still a struggle. I can't imagine for college students today, how do you like how do you put on a filter and figure out what you let in?
Yeah. When I went, I was pretty like I've been a Christian for a while. I would say like when I was 14 in high school, that's when I really was like, okay, I'm committed to my faith. Like I take this
That's
seriously, right?
amazing. Yeah.
I glory to God, but I can't take
Yes.
credit. It was just I just feel very blessed to have made that decision very early on. But when I was on campus, it was hard. Like you said, Jenny, like it's very hard to pinpoint, like, oh, this is a bad idea, like I shouldn't incorporate that. So there were some things that I had boundaries with, especially when it came to like religion. I was very like, I did debating in high school, so I was very eager to debate. It's like, okay, you want to talk about God? Let's like talk about God. And like those
So
those areas,
funny.
like teachers couldn't touch me, students couldn't touch me. It
I
was just like
love
I would
that.
fight. But with the other stuff that was more gray areas, I would say it was hard for me to like navigate that and be like, oh, this is making me pessimistic. This is making me cynical. It's going to breed, this like depression in my life in like a year's time. I wish I was able to notice that. So I would just like advise students to, if you don't know something and you're like, I don't know if this is true, I don't know where this comes from, don't be afraid to like ask your professor and be like, where did you get this information? Is this true? Is this backed up by data? Like,
Right.
who originated this theory that you're talking about? That's something I did in some areas, especially when it came to like the religious issues, that I don't regret, but I wish I applied it for other things. Sometimes you
I
get
see.
shy, you're like, I'm not going to push back against the professor.
Yeah.
But I would say just like after in their office hours, just reach out to them and really be like, hey, like I'm supposed to write this paper, but it's on a topic that I don't think really is valid. So, can I just write about something else? Like, I don't think this makes sense. Like push back and meet with them and talk through it all. Don't just take it all as like truth.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so important. First listen to your gut. If something doesn't feel right, that's
Yeah.
your first sign that something is not right.
Yes.
Don't glorify your educators. Don't glorify anyone except,
Mhm.
your God or whoever whatever religion you subscribe to. But
Yeah.
don't glorify these professors or teachers. And this is coming from a teacher. So I will tell you, don't
Yeah.
glorify any of them. They're people and no one knows everything,
Mhm.
and if someone's giving you an idea, an example, or whatever, an assignment that you don't 100% feel or you believe there's something not okay about, dig deeper. Don't just
Yeah.
stop there. Do your own research, and I know that nowadays in social media, everyone says that do your own research. And by that, I don't mean go on Google. Like really do your
Right.
own research, go to
Yeah.
the primary source, talk to
Exactly.
other people, listen to what other people have to say, especially people that you wouldn't normally listen to. They might
Exactly.
have something worthy. um yeah, but I can't imagine going to college right now.
Mhm.
And it's such a shame because I really believe, your college experience is it's one of the last moments in your life before you become a full-fledged adult, where you get to
Yeah.
do something selfish, where you get to do something for
Yes.
yourself, because your college life is all for you.
That's
It's
right.
that last stop before you commit yourself to your career. And if you're in a career where you're being of service, if you're a nurse, a doctor, a teacher, um,
Mhm.
before you really give yourself and you embark on this other different chapter of your life. So
Mhm.
it should be a special time. Yeah. So
Yeah. It really should. Like again, you're so right. Like it's about you at that time. So don't
mhm.
just feel like, oh, I'm sitting here and I just need to like take it. Like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
a great
no.
reminder.
Besides the fact that you're probably paying a lot of money.
Exactly. That
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
Yes, it's not free. You're not sitting, and even if it
Mhm.
was free, it's your education,
Exactly. Yeah,
It's going into your mind and into your heart. You need to be okay with it. Yeah.
absolutely. Can I
Um,
throw out one more thing
absolutely.
for the
Yes. Are you
professor
kidding?
college thing?
Yeah.
I would say like this is probably not going to apply to everyone, but pretty early on, you should just find your professor's social media and like find out what causes they are following. That's all I'm going to say. Like if you can find their Twitter or add them on Facebook, that's very important.
Wow.
That's
I
all
would have
I'll
never
say.
thought of that. That's such a good tip because for my generation, we didn't really have that. Facebook was just being born. And
Yeah,
we had, like, I don't know if you guys still have it. We had Rate My Professor, that website. That's all we had.
I've never used that. Okay, got
See,
it.
that's I'm such a dinosaur.
Interesting.
So that's
Yeah,
all we had
no,
to go by. That and word of mouth. Like you would ask people, like, "Hey, did you take this person? And how did it
yeah.
go? How was it?" Um,
Got it. No,
so
I found social media to be very
that's such a
interesting.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I would never think of that. Yeah.
It might not, I mean, like they might have a policy against that. I don't know. But yeah, just something to look into, especially Twitter since it's kind of open.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, and see, and that's not to say that you can judge someone completely on their social media
Exactly.
because it would be logical to think that these professionals are able to separate their personal beliefs and their personal
Mhm,
lives from their job as educators. But as we've seen in the recent days on the news, that's not always
mhm.
the case.
Yeah,
And for anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about, the case with the teacher in Sacramento,
yeah.
how he was indoctrinating these children um, very openly,
Mhm.
right?
Man,
So
Penny, that case had me shook. Did you see the school board meeting?
I did, and I just my I was proud of those parents, but my heart
Mhm.
was breaking for those parents because
Yeah.
um and you and I spoke about this privately. I was a high school teacher for 11 years.
Mm,
So you see a lot of things that you go, what?
wow.
No, what's happening? Um it's very, very interesting, but it's so heartbreaking to see someone that would have this chosen career because no one's forcing you. You choose this. And
Mhm.
usually people that become teachers are not there for the fame and the money because there isn't
Yeah.
any. You're
Mhm.
doing this because it's your calling, because you really believe that you can help and make a difference.
Mhm.
And to see someone take that, which should be so sacred, right? You're to
Yeah.
helping young people build a foundation for their lives and use that against them. It was this. I was disgusted. I was all sorts of I had all sorts of
Yeah.
emotions going on.
I
Yeah.
can imagine. Yeah, it was heartbreaking for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
And then you think, well, hopefully it's just that one. But is
Mm.
it just that one?
Oh, he said there are other teachers in the school who
Right.
support what I'm doing. And
Well, for
then
anybody who's a teacher out there, you know
mhm,
that nothing happens in your classroom without the knowledge of the administration and your other teachers, because kids talk.
yeah,
They'll come into your classroom and they'll say, "Hey, guess what I just did?
yeah,
I was working on this last night. I Or something as simple as you see them come in and they're tired and they'll tell you, "Well, I went to bed at midnight." And you're like, "Why? Why'd you do that?" "Oh, because I was out at a protest so I could get extra credit for so and so's class." And then all of a sudden you go, "Wait, what?
right.
You did what?" So everybody knows. It's
Yeah,
whenever kids are involved, it's really difficult to keep things under wraps.
there is no way. Yeah, it's like people had to have known. And
Yeah.
even the fact that at the end of the meeting, the school board people, like they ran
They just
away.
left. They
So
just
that makes me
left.
even more worried. Like, why would you run? are you hiding something? Are you scared people are gonna find out something? Like, anyway,
Yeah.
that's all. I will continue to pay attention to that, because I think that's gonna be like, it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, I think more,
Hopefully, I mean, if this
yeah,
isn't it, we're in trouble, because
right,
what more proof do you need? That
exactly,
was insane, and I feel terrible for those kids and
yeah,
any other kids. If you're going through something like this and you're a student,
mm-hmm.
find someone to talk to.
Yeah,
Talk to your parents, talk to anybody. Just tell
yeah,
them you're uncomfortable, and
absolutely,
yeah, and help them. Hopefully they'll be able to help you move on to the next step. But
yeah,
I wanted to bring it back to that first video of yours that I saw that really like I mentioned earlier, it's like an onion. You keep peeling back the layers every time you watch your video. It was, and I want to get the title correctly, "This is how I escaped the cult of wokeness."
yes.
That video is amazing, but I was scared for you and I didn't even know you. And I just saw
Oh,
that pop up in my suggested, and I was like, "Oh my God." And I just remember feeling afraid for you. Like, what? She really
oh
said this?
no. Wait, are you were afraid for me because of the title?
Right, like for your safety. Like I thought, like in my head, I
Oh,
thought, you had just
I
like
hear
opened
you.
up a can of worms. Um,
Oh,
that's what I mean when I
interesting.
say I was afraid for you. Um,
Got you. Wow.
yeah. So
Um, yes.
tell me about that. I have so many questions.
Well,
What was that process like?
I mean, honestly, I wasn't really afraid to say that and make that title, because literally, like, everyone, I'll say like 95%, there's like a good handful that are not woke. Everyone is woke, right?
Mhm.
Um, and wokeness inspires like a certain cowardice. Like, when people see you face to face, no one's ever gonna, like, once you make a video like that, no one's gonna talk about that in real life. They're gonna dance around the issue, because like wokeness makes you fragile. So I just knew that
Right.
no one's gonna confront me about this video unless you had, like, I don't know, like, it's just not gonna happen. And my bets were right. Like, no one's talked to me about this video that's woke. No
That's
one said
amazing.
anything. Zero
Wow.
pushback from people who know me, because of the nature of wokeness. Again, it just makes you like very internalized, like very narcissistic.
Hmm.
I would bet that people would rather avoid, you know, even crossing paths with me in person than being like, hey, I'm gonna fight you.
Right. Yeah, then having to face you.
That's
That
most
makes
likely
sense.
not gonna happen. Yeah, yeah. And so nothing's happened at all. Only positive things have happened with that video. In fact, I would say to the point of making other people emboldened who are also in this like woke bubble, to be like, yeah, I watched Kimi's video and I'm posting it on my story, and screw you guys if you have anything negative to say. That gave me so much, like, wow, like
Yeah.
other people are being brave. um but yeah, I had to like make that video and tell that story. And ultimately, I'm not saying anything negative. I'm not like saying
No.
that, I'm not calling for violence. I'm not calling for, people to punch woke people. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Hmm.
this is what I believed, and it didn't do anything positive for my health. And so now I'm doing something positive for my health. The end of the
Right.
story. So yeah, that was, and I also live in a great neighborhood, where like I've been here for 4 years. My neighbors are awesome. Like, we all look out for each other. So if anything were to happen, like, I know that we would, like, people would have my back. So yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah, once I watched the video, um, I wasn't any longer afraid for you. And like I said at the beginning, I was so happy that someone could put these ideas in such a digestible way for everybody else, especially for the younger generation. I think, I'm pretty sure, I'm gonna go ahead and say you've probably changed more minds and lives than you think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's
That would be an honor.
well, because you're advocating for the individual, which is
Mm,
what set your video is apart from any others in that realm.
mm,
Like you mentioned, you didn't call for violence, you didn't say, oh, if you're woke, you're stupid. You
mhm,
talked about it from an individual point of view and how it was affecting you and how it's
mhm.
probably affecting many others. And to me,
Absolutely, I hear you.
that made such a difference. And
Mm,
to summarize your video for those that haven't watched it, which I'm sure everyone has, you talk a lot about how it was affecting you emotionally and psychologically.
yeah.
Yes. So is that why you called it a cult?
Yeah, I mostly go with a cult theme for first the social aspect,
Mm-hmm.
because like especially the more I think it's a spectrum for sure. There's some people who are just like, oh, like I have white fragility on the shelf in my, at home. And then there are people who are completely like, they know all the lingo, like, everything about their lifestyle is catered to woke ideologies and, that sort of thing. And I was in like the extreme bubble. And everyone could only like eat at specific restaurants, you know, catering to certain identity groups only, like only wanting to hang out with me because I appear to be a Black woman, and all of that
What?
kind of, and I say that's like in speculation, like not just
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
but it was just
But
like you could
I
tell.
never thought of that. You're probably right.
Yeah, that happens quite a lot where people want to look like they're doing something,
Hmm.
woke and good, and so it's like you're a visual representation of that, morality in a sense. So like being
Right.
associated with Black women and having Black women friends and queer friends, trans friends, like that all is like boosting your like woke score. So everything just became very hive mind. Like
Yeah.
no one could say anything like little outside of the box. Like I'll give an extreme example, like saying that I watched, a Jordan Peterson lecture, or that
How
I
could you?
like, it just is like, how could you do that? It's horrible.
Yeah.
And so I would get into those tiny skirmishes all the time where it's like, oh no, like you want to eat at In-N-Out. I remember one day I wanted to eat at In-N-Out, and it was like, everyone was like, because everyone's vegan. It's like vegan is more moral to do than to not. And so
Mm-hmm.
all those things just felt like a cult. Like it felt like there were
Yeah.
rules, there was right and wrong within those rules, and any deviation from that was ostracized. Oh, you're like breaking the mold. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other aspect of why I call it a cult, not necessarily even a religion, is just the negative impact it has on you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just like me, it's like other people are kind of, they always suffering with like mental issues, anxiety. But for me, I noticed that when I started just forgiving those offenses and kind of becoming more open-minded, I was like psychologically improving. Like I could just wake up and work and see someone on the street and say hi and not be offended by getting the wrong look.
Right.
So there was a definite change. um, so yeah, cult because of the social aspect, and I say cult also because of the negative impact it has on you, making you more, your mental health just deteriorating.
It's been in my experience, and I want to ask you if you've experienced that as well, that these quote unquote woke people, um they they judge others and even themselves, I would say. um they judge their morality based on their political affiliations. Have you seen that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I have noticed that as well. um I think it's really gotten to an extreme point because of social media, because we
Right.
look at other people through social media these days. not as in person as before.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes very easy to judge who someone is based on like who they follow, who they retweet, like, you know, politically, what side of the aisle do the people that they retweet fall on? And then it's like, oh,
Right.
I'm looking at through your politics.
Right.
So yeah.
And then there's that instant conclusion. Well, you
Yes.
must be a good person because you care about X, Y, and Z. And you
Yeah.
must be a terrible person because you did this and you liked that picture, or you posted about this, or you ate at that restaurant, or you voted for this person.
Yeah.
And I personally have a really hard time coming to terms with that, because to me, your morality is not that simplistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It
No.
it's not just on who you voted for, because you could be a Democrat woke person and be terrible, or be a really nice
Exactly.
person, and you can be a
Yeah.
Republican who's a jerk, or vice
Yeah.
versa. I think once we start creating these groups of if you belong to this group, then you're okay.
Mhm.
I think that's so dangerous.
I agree. I think again, like you said, with communism coming in, they push out the religions, and so
Yes. We
now
see a
people
common
are
denominator.
common denominator.
Yeah.
And I think of how like we praise, like the media really praises one side as benevolent and godlike. And I think
Mm-hmm.
of how like in North Korea, like people sing to
Yes.
Kim Jong Un. They like
Yes.
worship him, and they're like the sun
They
revolves
call
around
him the
him.
Supreme or something like that. Or is
Yeah,
or is
like
that the
they
father?
I
I-
I'm not sure which one, but they basically like they're on the
Yeah.
level of like the gods. And so I think what you
Right.
have now in America is like almost that same thing playing out, where it's like religion is bad, it's horrible, but then
Mm-hmm.
also here's a new religion and here's your new god, and here are like the rules and the commandments you have to follow.
Right.
And so people easily are like, oh, you
Yeah.
don't like the current administration, oh wow, like
Right.
like they allude that to morality,
Mm-hmm.
because it's filling that void. Yeah.
Right. And it's so interesting because I if you don't subscribe to a religion or to a faith or spirituality, that's fine, right? That's a
Mhm.
personal choice. We all have a different path. But it's so interesting to know how um that part of your life will get
Mhm.
filled with something.
Exactly. It's one of those
Yeah.
things, kind of like the whale comparison. It's one of those things that we just have as humans. No matter
Mm-hmm.
how many times you try to like push it aside, we'll fill it with something. Like it's just part of the human instinct to find meaning in
Right.
that, religious sense, that sense of meaning. So, and also in terms of the morality and evil. Um, so yeah, it's gonna get occupied. So be careful. Just always search out like what you believe. Make sure you know what you believe. Don't try to
Mm-hmm.
treat religion as like something that's like useless. At least look at it as an operating system. Like, do I just want to take like
Yeah.
Buddhist principles and apply that to my life? Because somebody's gonna try and snatch that up. Like,
Somebody will come in to fill that void, and it may
yeah,
not be so good for you.
exactly.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that so much. And we lightly touched upon division in our country. I want to go back
Yeah,
to that for a little bit.
yeah.
Um, Obviously you live in California, in LA. Well, not obviously, I don't know if we mentioned that, but you do. And
I
that's
do.
one of the most what I'm trying to that's one of the most open places, right? Politically,
Mm-hmm.
ideologically, they're supposed to be very at the forefront of advancement when it comes to social justice.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of division there?
Interesting question. I would say it's just so one-minded that uh, it's like everyone's just on the same page. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And if anyone thinks opposite, they're usually very quiet, or they even live geographically on the outskirts of LA. But like to
Right.
be in LA and to see people like oh, I'm a conservative, or like it's a conservative like cluster. It's very rare, or not even conservative politically, just like I live a different lifestyle. Like everyone's just kind of on the same page. So,
That's
it's like there's not even division there.
Yeah, that's so
It's one
interesting and
minded.
so good to hear because
Oh.
where I am, Miami it's interesting because obviously Florida is known as a red state, but
Mhm.
Miami is like the complete opposite. It's
Yeah.
very um it's blue for the most part, but then
Yeah.
within the community you have the predominantly large Cuban population who
Mhm.
is either extremely in touch with the Republican side or
Yeah.
extreme left, and
Yeah.
you do see families have issues, friendships no longer continuing, families no longer having a normal relationship. So that
Yeah.
definitely goes on here, but it's interesting that you haven't seen that.
Well, I think because it's everyone's very like trying to be the one mind, like, which
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing. And a lot of people are, I don't know if closeted is the right term, but there'll be some people who are like, oh, I don't really agree with what's happening politically, but like I can't say that, like I can't afford to say that out loud, or
Mm-hmm.
it's just very hush hush for those who dissent in opinions or who don't align with wokeness. So the division is not obvious. Like everyone just kind of presents to be like, okay, yeah, 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 we're just gonna follow along for now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's so interesting. Um, and you mentioned you're an interdisciplinary artist.
Yes.
How and the world of art, we can say it's ideally belonging to the woke people. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? You need to
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you need to lead a certain lifestyle, have certain ideologies in order to really partake in
Yeah.
that world. How do you make that work?
Um, I mean, I only recently just like came out of like the whole woke thing.
Yeah, that's true.
So like for a lot of like the time that I was in college and it's like kind of out of college for a little bit, um, the art I was creating, what you would maybe call it woke, or just it wasn't very contradictory or obvious. I do like paintings of like skateboarders and girl skateboarders,
Hmm.
trans queer skateboarders in LA. That's what I was doing till like 2020, and then I focused on music for a bit. I also skate, so like I'll kind of be involved in certain skate groups and that sort of thing. Now I don't really. I feel like I can now fully be an artist because I think artists from back in the day always pushing against the grain and pushing against the culture. Like you think of like Marcel Duchamp with like the Dada period, he like just put a urinal on display and called that art. And I feel like because I'm
Yeah.
now counterculture, I can really now provoke the status quo, and
Wow.
create things that will make people like uncomfortable because now everyone's comfortable with wokeness.
That's so
So I
true. So
I
you
still
found a
haven't
whole new purpose.
exactly. Now I'm like, okay, I have the guts to do it now. I feel like I've already said my opinions and
Yeah.
stirred up controversy that way. So let's see how we
Oh,
can
I'm
make this
so excited to
visual.
see what you're gonna create.
Thanks.
That's gonna
Thank you
be
so much.
amazing.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. Yeah,
I'm
thank
so
you.
excited for you. That must feel
Thanks.
so rewarding, to
Yes,
approach something that you love to do with a newfound sense of purpose. That's,
absolutely.
I'm
It
excited for
really-
you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah, and then hopefully you'll come down to Miami and showcase your
Yeah,
work. And yeah,
absolutely. I would
you
love that.
yes, that would be not would be, that will be. We're gonna
Amen.
manifest that. Yes, that
Yes,
will be
period.
amazing.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
do what advice would you give to people that are afraid of speaking up?
One or at least maybe two helpful things. that I've experienced for my case is, again, like I said with the cult of wokeness video, people are not gonna confront you the way you think they are. Just because wokeness makes you very fragile. Like, if I was woke and I wanted to confront someone over a video they made, I would burst out into tears the moment I thought I was about to do that. So don't think that people are gonna come out after you. Some people may not even like know what's going on, so they don't even know what you're talking about. Half the people I've talked to CRT about are like, I don't even know what CRT is. So, like, I don't mind, you saying that you hate it.
Right.
So like people aren't gonna attack you. I think sometimes we think in our minds, like, we overplay out the scenario. It's not gonna happen. And if it could possibly happen, like, stand your ground. Like, you said what you said. It is like, that's what you believe. If people can't stand that and they're like, they claim to be your friend, then if that makes them too uncomfortable, then they weren't really your friend, because now you're really expressing your authentic self, right? So if they can't get with your authentic self, were they really your friend to begin with? So maybe that loss of a friend is a good thing, and maybe you'll gain a friend that appreciates you for you, and that'll be a good thing. And the second thing is, you're gonna find out more, like, a lot of people actually agree and think with you. It's just that they also were afraid to say anything. But the moment you stand up, like, other people be like, oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. I cannot even emphasize the amount of times that happened for me personally, like with my personal friends, just being like, thank you for saying that. I've been thinking that, but I didn't know that it was okay to think like that. So yeah, you won't experience as much confrontation as you expect, and you will probably get more support than you expect. So that should encourage you to just be brave. Just rip the Band-Aid off. You can turn off your phone for like the next 24 hours if you want to just like not see like DMs or notifications, and then check it later when you feel like comfortable.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly. The only thing I would add, which you've already talked about this, is, do it in a way that you can be proud of. Don't incite violence. Don't do anything that you can't stand by later on. But that goes with anything in life, right? Any decision that you make sure it's something that you can always stand by. So I think that's great. Do you have, and I think you've heard this before, do you have any plans, future plans within politics? Do you see yourself in politics?
I don't know. It's so funny because I get so many comments on YouTube that are just like, Kimi for president. I'm like, where are you getting that? Like, I clearly, like, it's just not
right.
But it is very interesting because I don't know where people just conclude like, oh, okay, run for president. I'm like, I'm 27.
You know what it is?
Child.
You know what I think it is the fact that we have, it seems like we have lost our faith in the democratic process, in the media, in journalism. It's so difficult to find a person that can encompass all these qualities that we used to have in our, in our culture, when we would turn on our TV and watch the news, when we would read the newspaper. So when people come across someone like you that's able to be genuine and authentic and do it in a way where you're adding to, you're bringing something to the table, not taking away, people want you to represent them. So that means you're doing great.
That's powerful. I'll take that. Maybe one day. I mean, maybe one day.
Yeah, you have quite some time to make up your mind. And I think you should give us the gift of your art for now. Let's start there.
I would love to do that. That would be, that's a good goal for now.
Yeah, and then maybe down the line you can dive into that other world, which
that would sounds like a solid life plan.
So, we
Uh,
wouldn't be Miami Lit if we didn't talk about books. So let's talk a little bit about
okay.
books. Do you have a favorite book that you and I know that's hard to pick like one favorite book.
Yeah. Um, it is a hard one. So I'm just gonna say maybe like books that I've read this year. How to Fight Anti-Semitism by Barry Weiss is really good.
Yes. That's such a
That
good
is a
one. Yeah.
really, have you read it?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That book, it just flows so like brilliantly and it reads like an adventure, but it's very like heavy topics and it's very informative at the
Yeah.
same time. Um,
Yeah, the
plus it
plight
just
of the
like fits in
Jewish
your hand.
people. Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, the
No,
plight of
you're
the
good.
Jewish people is, to me, it's no matter how much I read or how many documentaries I watch, to me there's such a sense of magic in there because like
Yeah.
how did you all get through all this? And you did it in a way much, like South Africa, you're still whole. You're not broken.
Yeah.
And here
Mm-hmm.
we are in, again, one of the most free countries. We have everything that we need to succeed, and
Mm-hmm.
we are feeling broken when nothing has
Yeah.
happened to us. In the grand scheme of
Mm-hmm.
things, nothing has happened. And we're here picking up the
Absolutely.
pieces. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's yeah, I just finished that like maybe last month, but it's a really, really good book. Like if especially if you're not Jewish, you should
mhm.
really,
Yes, I
really
agree
check
with
that out.
that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Do you have a favorite author?
Favorite author would I this has been a while, so I haven't updated that, but I would say my favorite author would be between Malcolm Gladwell
Oh,
and
that's a good one.
yeah, I would have to say Malcolm because I've read a lot of his books, maybe just like leaving out like two of them,
Hmm.
but like that his stuff really impacted me like coming out of high school and like into my move to the US.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, his stuff is good. I haven't read too many of his books, but what I have read, it's been great.
It's
What are you
amazing.
currently reading?
I'm currently reading The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. It is also, I would say that's one of my top 10 of the year books, but maybe even just like one of my favorite all-time books because it breaks
Right.
down wokeness, and it never uses the term woke, by the way, but it breaks down that phenomenon. Oh my goodness, it is so, so good. And anyone who's curious about what's happening like on college campuses,
Mm-hmm.
with like the generation Gen Z and like what's happening with their psyche and their development, or if you're a parent or if you are concerned about like bringing up your child to not like get into that woke ideology, you need to get The
Right.
Coddling of the American Mind. It's like almost a necessity. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's on my list. So I can't wait to read it now based on your review.
Yeah. So, so good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
What about you? Do you have any faves or currents that you're reading?
oh, well, actually I have here. Let me just grab it really fast. Oh my goodness. This is the one I'm rereading. I read this like over a decade ago. It's called In Cuba. It was a German Shepherd.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it's like magical
That's cool.
realism,
Uh-huh.
that genre of writing. But it's about it's a bunch of little short stories
Yeah.
that encompass the larger theme. They're all somehow linked, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
about that idea of and if you meet any Cubans, it's kind of like the running joke, like, oh, in Cuba I was a doctor, in Cuba I had a plantation, and everything in
Oh
Cuba was
wow.
like, that nostalgia,
Fancy.
and the memories somehow shift So that's why she titles it In Cuba I Was a German Shepherd, and it's like this tiny little dog.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
I like
it's
that.
yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you've ever left your home country, you can uh connect to that idea of having to start new somewhere else, and having that longing for where you came from. So
Mhm.
I'm rereading this right now.
Yeah.
So I had missed it, so I picked it up again. And my favorite book, ooh, that's difficult, as you know. It like
Yeah.
changes. I feel like for each stage of life I had a favorite book. So
Mhm.
I want to say my last favorite book would have to be, let me look around here. I don't think I have it here with me. But oh man, I hadn't been asked this question, so now I'm drawing blanks.
Or at least your favorite book, like in the recent months.
In the recent months, I read The Cubans by Anthony De
Okay.
Palma. Yeah,
Okay.
and that was really good too. So he
Got
he
it.
writes about the, like real life families, and they're living through Irma, the hurricane.
Mhm.
So he documents that in his writing. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
But another, actually, now that I just remembered, another one that was super interesting is by Nicholas Griffin, and he wrote The Year of Dangerous Days, which was
Mhm.
1980. And here in Miami, in that year, there was racial tensions with the police. So there were a lot of protests, very much like what's happening now. They wanted to defund the
Mm.
police. There were issues in Cuba resulting in what's called El Mariel, which Castro pretty much opened up his prisons and psychological hospitals and let everyone go. So
Oh.
within, yeah, Miami received, and I don't recall the exact number, but over 100,000 Cuban refugees, many of whom were, prisoners, and not political prisoners, like people that had done very bad things, like murderers, rapists,
Mm.
people with deep psychological
Yeah.
issues that had to be hospitalized, along with, every once in a
Mhm.
while, your normal, quote unquote, normal person. So
Mhm.
everything that happened in that year should have made the city crumble. And
Mhm.
the author, Nicholas Griffin, does a great investigative journalist piece, and he really documents everything and how the city managed to survive. So that's been a
Yeah.
great read. Yeah. Which I read
Awesome.
last month. No, 2 months ago. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you for asking.
Of
I'm
course.
used to thinking about the questions and never applying them to myself. So,
Got it.
yeah. And for
Good to know.
anybody, we'll add one more now with everything going on in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
For anybody that wants to read a little more about that, you can look to Khaled Hosseini, who wrote The Kai
Mhm.
Runner, which is, I guess,
Yeah.
because it became a film, everyone's aware, but he has another two books that also discuss, the experience of being an Afghan in Afghanistan and out of Afghanistan. And he
Mhm.
does it in a very beautiful way. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'll note that down too.
Yeah.
Wow.
No. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. This was so great. I feel like I could talk to you forever, but I'm not going to
Yeah.
because you have things to do. So, thank you so much. And,
Of course.
for anybody listening or watching, we will link all your social media to down below so they can reach out to you, and hopefully, you're able to shed some more light in whatever they need.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been amazing. I've had a
Oh,
great time just talking through these issues. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
oh, that means a lot. Thank you so much. Yeah, no,
Mhm.
for real. No, episode aside, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you.
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. Anytime.
And you're welcome to come back anytime.
Mhm.
Hopefully, in the next couple months, something great happens and we can have another episode.
Yes, that would be dope.
Yeah,
I'm
we
so
can
down.
talk about how, I don't know, Cuba got internet. Hopefully.
Yes. Hopefully by that time it better happen. That
So
would be
take care.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, take
You
care and be
too.
safe, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much. Take care and we'll talk very soon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.